What's up? Welcome in, Hoge and Jahns with you 1 day away from the NFL draft. We are finally here, Johnsy.
Finally, at last. These couple days always seem to drag, but
Yeah,
there's still a lot to talk about.
it drags, and yet I still don't feel like I have enough time because I was up till 1 a.m. working last night trying to finish our CHGO Bears 100, which we are unveiling today as we record this on Wednesdays. We switched the days around a little bit this week just because of the draft and the schedule. We had the press conference with Ian Cunningham yesterday, so it made more sense to do the pod after that. And then same thing. Our just so you're aware, Friday we will recap Thursday night on Friday morning. We'll wake up early Friday morning, and get a pod out early for you on Friday to recap whatever
to get you through your work day.
Yeah. So a little Wednesday, Friday transition here. And we got our old friend Marissa filling in for Kent today because Kent is on his way to Kansas City with the Athletic Football Show. They're going live from there during the draft, and that's going to be great content. And look what I did, Johns. I went ahead and just had this bad boy printed.
I love it. Did you get me one?
I did not, because it cost $60 at the FedEx store. So I don't know if you need a birthday present or something at some point. Maybe I'll get you a copy of the Beast.
I save them all on my desktop.
for those listening and not watching, I printed out the Beast because I just got tired. Well, it's a long story. I'm dealing with this neck issue, which is bad timing with the draft, and I keep looking down at my iPad and stuff, and my chiropractor is going to kill me. So we're making life adjustments here as the draft rolls on. Everything good?
We're good. We got 2 kids homesick.
Yeah.
Throwing, making this draft week a little bit more interesting as we try to finalize all our stories for this week. But yeah, if one sick kid starts coughing in the background, you know why now.
Well, our sick kid at CHGO, Nicholas Moriano, he jumped on our call this morning and said he was sick. And I said, you will stay the hell away from our studio today because you are not getting us all sick. And I'm sure you have that paranoia right now, too, with 2 kids home.
I'm waiting for the text from Kevin Fishbane telling me to stay home tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
If he was a nice friend and colleague, he would have sent it already. But
I was going to say, you will jump on that in 2 seconds.
I did yesterday.
There were a couple people at Howell's Hall yesterday wondering if you still work there.
Why is that a running joke? I still do.
So, yeah. All right. No, we were at Howell's yesterday, and there was a press conference. I should point out, congrats to David Montgomery, now a Lion, the veteran winner of the Brian Piccolo Award, and Jack Sanborn, the rookie winner of the Brian Piccolo Award. That always happens the Tuesday before the draft, and then they have a press conference, which is typically the general manager. But the NFL has instituted this, and I like it. You got to have a high-ranking personnel guy that's not your GM talk twice a year. And so the Bears gave us Ian Cunningham, the assistant GM, yesterday, instead of Ryan Poles. And you get a glimpse of what it's probably going to look like next year when Ian Cunningham is running his own team.
Yeah, he said a lot without saying anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought he did a good job.
Actually, yeah. Bravo for handling the first, I guess, individual press conference where he has to handle very sensitive draft related questions a few days away, from a big day for any team.
Yeah. I think he did. There were a couple of times where I'm like, you could maybe do a little bit better job lying here, but like the Bijan Robinson comment I thought was hilarious.
Maybe he's throwing up smoke screens.
Well, right. I mean, that's the thing. You don't know. You can't. That's my favorite part about this press conference is like literally anything they could be saying.
What if Ian Cunningham is the best smokescreen artist that the Bears have?
And that's why they put him up there.
Yes.
Well, he's got a straight face.
Throwing him out there.
Yeah.
He even admitted, taking a running back at 9.
Right. I know. But he paused like it was the greatest question in the world. Would you take a running back in the top 10? And he was like, yeah, I think so. Sure. If you say so. That's obviously
I think it's worth it.
That wasn't his quote, but that's kind of how I read it. I enjoyed it. It was fun. And, honestly, good for Ian Cunningham, who, again, is, he already had an offer to be, he had two teams looking at him very hard. One offer he turned down with the Cardinals to be their general manager this year, and he's well on his way. And I think the Bears know that. I think Ryan Poles knows that. That's only a matter of time. But it is a big advantage that he was still around this year and decided to stay with the Bears. You heard him talking about that a little bit yesterday too. And I thought that was I think Jason Leisure asked that question. It was a good one off the top. Just like, in what ways are things running smoother this year compared to last year? Because that first year when you take over in January and you inherit a different scouting staff, one you did not hire, one that's already been hard at work since, late summer on these prospects. And you got to find a way to gel different grading systems and thoughts and trust scouts that maybe you've never worked with before and put together a board and draft all these players. Like, that's not easy. So it's you saw the changes the Bears made after the draft last year. Now they have their guys. Now they have their systems. Ian Cunningham talking about now they know their coaching staff better to know what they want too and how this exactly all fits together. So that part was actually very interesting to me hearing him talk about that.
Well, we've been through this before. Unfortunately, yes. Some scouts stay, some scouts go. There's always a lot of turnover for teams in that side of things. But the year that Ryan Poles' staff had to work with Matt Eberflus's staff, that's the most meaningful part of this. Like, they got to work together hand in hand throughout the season. Then not only after that, there are more coaches involved, like on the road scouting this year than I think I can ever recall before. Just in terms of like showing up to pro days, like in force, in mass. They flew together in private planes, and those conversations that they had, like in transit, really, it's invaluable for the grading. And you get to a better feel for what the coaches want, what they like. You hear different concerns, different experiences. So I think that definitely matters in how the Bears are going to stack and grade these guys.
Yeah, and I just, it might not result in better results at all, but I think you go into, because the draft is just that way, but I think you go into this weekend at least feeling a lot more comfortable than maybe you did last year, especially because just as a first-year GM too for Ryan Poles last year, like, you remember the video they put out of him calling Kyler Gordon, which was the first pick, and you could kind of see a little bit of relief, some emotion there too, just making that first pick, and then now for the first time he'll have a first-round pick to make at number 9, or if they move around, maybe it's a little bit later. Any other takeaways from that press conference?
Well, I was going to ask you, like, you hear him say that there's 6 to 8 players that were comfortable taking in that range. Now, when we last talked to Ryan Poles at the NFL owners meetings in Phoenix, he said that you usually include the quarterbacks in the conversation for your blue players just because you have to for your projections, and usually because quarterbacks are, well, they're graded differently. You have to include them in the top 10. Bears still have a top 10 pick. So who are your, let's call it 5 players that you think the Bears are comfortable with right now at number 9?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the quarterbacks out of that conversation, whether they keep them in there or not. I think it's kind of a waste of time. But yeah, I would imagine that Will Anderson's one of them. I think this is where it gets hard. I mean, it really gets hard right away because I tend to think Peter Skoronski's still on that list.
So do I.
Despite the arm length concerns, and we know that Ryan Poles cares about that. I just think he's too good and there's no perfect prospect, but so close to that perfect prospect type player in the similar ways that Quentin Nelson was, even if you're going to view him as a guard and view Skoronski as a guard. And there's no question with Quentin Nelson that he was a guard coming out. I just think he's too perfect that I don't know how you can look at him and be like, that's just a safe pick, and it makes our offensive line instantly better, regardless of where he plays.
I'm sure there's a lot of eye rolls right now from Bears listeners. I picked him in our final Beat Writer mock draft, which is up right now at theathletic.com. And, of course, Bears fans aren't happy. How can you take a guard that high? I'm telling you, the Bears have not spent this much time on him like that time spent, it's extra than other prospects. There is interest there. I think there's a like there. Whether or not that means he's ahead of Paris Johnson Jr., I don't know. But there's obviously some interest in Peter Skoronski in the top 10. It's been that way from the start. I have not seen one outside analyst rate another offensive lineman higher than him. And then sometimes that carries weight because at this point, all these outside analysts have input from every single team.
Yeah.
They're friends around the league.
And like, if you want to get specifically like, okay, I have seen guys put Paris Johnson as the number one overall offensive tackle. I mean, Dane Brugler, Dane took Skoronski out of the tackle section of the beast and put him in the guard, and that's fine. But I think if you ask him who's O-line one, though, if you're just going to do that offensive line, then and I think he does. I have it right here in front of me. Because he put his 100 in on the back. And he does have Skoronski 7th, and Paris Johnson doesn't come in until 12th.
See?
So
Brandon Thorne from the Trends Warfare podcast, Substack, all that stuff was on here. Extremely great stuff on offensive line play. He was on our last podcast talking about how Skoronski's probably better at guard, but he was still his highest graded player of all the offensive linemen.
And then, so just take that information, even if we're going to sit here and just the two of us say, okay, fine, guard. He's a guard, whatever. And now picture yourself as Ryan Poles even having that same conversation. Just because he's a guard, you're going to pass on him? I mean, to me, that makes no sense whatsoever. What do the Bears have right now there that makes you feel like he still doesn't help make the offensive line better for Justin Fields? I mean, I don't think that they're committed to Tevin Jenkins. Obviously, Nate Davis, they just signed him. Okay, so you plug him in, and he's
your right guard,
right? But I think you also, in the back of your head, even with a free agent, always keep in mind that more times than not, 3 years later, you're like, okay, that one might not have worked out, or even if it does work out, you're still moving on from them just because of age or whatever. And all due respect to Nate Davis, I think Skoronski comes in and is a better player almost immediately.
Yeah. I think you said this first. Peter Skoronski was unanimous All-American at Northwestern, not for some Alabama, USC, Michigan.
On a bad Northwestern team,
bad Northwestern team, a unanimous All-American at left tackle. He's earned the right to at least try that position at the start of his NFL career, has he not? I put that in my mock draft too, my mock draft pick. He's earned it.
Right, and I understand going from high school to the Big Ten is not the same thing as going from the Big Ten to the NFL. But when you go from Maine South to the Big Ten, and the plan was for you to come in and play right tackle to start, and all of a sudden Rashawn Slater decides to not stay for the COVID season, and he's out. Now you're the left tackle, and the offseason program was on again, off, on, off, on. Now there's no season. Now there is a season. Now we're going to get ready to go. And this was still when I was with Northwestern. And he goes in there in that first game against Maryland and just absolutely dominates. And then did that the rest of the season. I mean, that counts for something too. I mean, that's how it started. And then it ended, as you said, being a unanimous All-American. We could talk Peter Skoronski to death, but
you probably have at this point.
Yeah, I get it. Point is, I think we both think he's still on the Bears board and could very well be the best player available sitting there when they drafted 9. Now, I tend to actually think he'll be gone by then.
Ooh.
Which is a scenario I think we'll get to here in a little bit. Where are you on Jalen Carter?
I felt like everything Ian Cunningham yesterday was a smokescreen.
Yeah, so I almost fell into the trap because when and good for Potsy. I mean, one of my biggest takeaways yesterday, I tweeted this, is Jalen Carter is not high on Potsy's board. Okay, that much is obvious. But
Potsy has a board? I don't think he has a board.
It was just hilarious.
He has a yellow pad of paper like this if you're watching on YouTube, definitely.
How does he fit the hits principle? Oh, so he is a hits guy. He is a hits guy. He is, it's great. Good follow up there. I enjoyed it. And then basically Ian Cunningham says, well, he fits some of those traits. And my first reaction, I almost fell into the trap, was, oh, that means he's not a hits guy. But then it took me like 20 minutes, and I was like, yeah, but maybe that's a smokescreen. I think the reality is he probably doesn't fit all of the hits principle, but he's so damn good. I don't know that you can pass on him if he's still there at 9. So
yeah,
I don't have any, great inside information on this to confirm anything, but my gut, Johns, is telling me that he's still on the board. It's just a matter of where. I don't know that they've taken him off the board completely. I just don't know where he fits on the board.
I tend to agree with you. Maybe he's not part of those blue players anymore. Maybe he's moved to the red players, and that's not like red flag players. If you're new to the Bears grading system, it's blue, then red. So maybe his off the field question marks have moved him down a little bit. So maybe he's now a mid first round grade in a sense, just in terms of risk. But that the talent is obviously there. Is the motor there from Matt Eberflus? We'll see soon enough.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things that I will be watching very closely. I think we all will be. Now, there's been a lot of smoke about potentially the Seahawks taking Carter at 5. I tend to still think they're going to make a move for a quarterback, because as much as Geno Smith helped them, I am not sold that that's their permanent solution.
Was it Todd McShay who had something on that?
On what? On them taking Carter?
No, on them taking a quarterback.
I don't know. I think a few people. I think Peter Schrager had them taking a quarterback in his mock. Also, the thing about mock drafts is you have to really, and this is why I always make it clear, most mock drafts I do, I'm doing as if I was the GM, like what I would do. I'm giving you my opinion on these players. Now, at the end of this podcast, we're going to both tell you what we think the Bears are going to do. That's different. So some people do mocks that are like, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I think is going to happen. Peter Schrager was one of those, I think, like a week ago. And that's a different conversation. And that's where these guys are actually trying to pinpoint the picks. Regardless, I find it hard to believe Jalen Carter will get past the Lions at 6. So that is the thought of Jalen Carter being added to that defense. It's a little scary.
Yeah, the defensive line is going to be a problem. Maybe another reason to pick Peter Skoronski a couple picks later. Just say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who just turned off this podcast right now. All right, so Tyree Wilson's got to be the other defensive player in the top 5, right?
I think so. I think there's some metal. Now, this is where you get a little bit of a wild card because, and you heard Ian Cunningham, if you listened to that press conference yesterday, literally thank everyone in the organization. But one of the groups of people he thanked was, the medical staff, the training staff, and how much work they do on these guys to really get the medical information right. Now, the thing about Tyree Wilson, okay, you draw him up and you go, this is a 4-3 D end. I mean, this is a perfect fit. He's got the long arms. I love that he got better each. And that's one thing I really put a lot of stock in, John's. Like when guys sort of stall out as freshmen or sophomores, that worries me. And there's a couple of guys like that in specifically this position, but Tyree Wilson's not one. He just kept getting better. And it still feels like he's just scratching the surface of his ability. So in all those ways, I'm like, yeah, this guy's got to be on the Bears board. The only question is, he did have a right foot injury that required a screw and surgery. And so what's the long-term prognosis? Is it all clear? If it is, I think he's a perfect fit for the Bears. But if they're like, this might actually be an issue down the road, then maybe it's not so cut and dry that he could be a Bear.
So that's 4 players.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give you 3 names to maybe round out the 5th and maybe extend this to the original 7 players that may interest the Bears in number 9?
Sure.
The 2 cornerbacks, Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon.
Yep.
And then Paris Johnson Jr., the Ohio State left tackle.
Okay.
With the prerequisite arm length.
So that's 5, 6, 7.
7 players.
And Cunningham said 6 to 8. And so this is actually something I wanted to talk about. I think a skeptic can immediately be like, 6 to 8. I mean, don't you have an exact number? And maybe you just not give it. But here's the thing. Like, I could actually see it being 6 to 8 because it could be 6 players that they're like, those are the guys we're definitely taking at 9. If they're there, no trade back. They're just too good to pass on. And then you might have at 7 and 8 a couple guys that you're willing to take at 9, but you would prefer to trade back if there is an offer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, they're sort of on the fence of, all right, we like these guys. We're comfortable taking them at 9. But let's see if we can get them a little bit later, if possible. Add some draft capital. Like, those are real conversations that happen. And that's why I think that 6 to 8 number actually could be a little fluid and not, black and white. Can I give you a name that I think could be one, maybe that's number 8?
Okay.
Darnell Wright.
Ooh.
From Tennessee.
He's one of my favorite players in this draft.
Which my newsletter that went out this morning for CHGO diehards, actually today's went out free to everybody. So if you sign up for the newsletter or you just want to read it at allchgo.com, you can today. It's free and unlocked. But I always make bold predictions. And one of my bold predictions this year was the Bears draft Darnell Wright. Now, is that at 9? Is that after a trade back? I'm not sure. But because I kind of think that he falls in that category of, all right, we'd probably prefer to trade back, add some capital, get him a few picks later if possible. But if no one's calling, and this could be a real situation I think we got to talk about. Skoronski's off the board. Paris Johnson's off the board. I'm not sold that 4 quarterbacks actually get drafted before the Bears pick. One always falls. Justin Fields fell. Right? Like, to me, one of them's going to, it's just a guess, but I feel like that's a possibility. And then so someone else off that board that we just talked about goes early. And so they might be in a situation where it's like, okay, Darnell Wright's the next guy. We like him a lot. But if Paris Johnson and Skoronski off the board, you got to start looking at who's left. And it really comes down to then Darnell Wright and Broderick Jones. And then there's a pretty big drop-off. And so if you trade back, you might not get Darnell Wright. And there's been, I know Albert Breer had some of this on Broderick Jones, possibly some immaturity issues there, some entitlement issues that he reported. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff that comes out close to the draft you got to be careful with. But I think that's a scenario where if they're not getting quite the offer or no one's calling, just go ahead and take your guy and feel good about it. Because to me, he's a plug-and-play right tackle that allows you to keep Braxton Jones on the left side. Jones has a little bit more length, probably better suited over there, keep developing. You get an instant, immediate upgrade at one of your biggest holes on your roster.
I think the most ideal situation, like the dream scenario for the Bears, is that like Will Levis is available at 9. Mm-hmm. The Titans get anxious, jump from 11 to 9. And at 11, you're looking at possibly Darnell Wright. Because the Eagles aren't going to take him at number 10. They already have their all-pro, highly paid right tackle. I think the Bears like Wright a lot. A lot. I don't know where he would stack, because that's the Bears word. Like Ryan Pace used the word clouds. Like Ryan Pace's Bears had clouds. That's how they graded their players. Stacks is how.
Some would argue a lot of their ideas were in the clouds.
Hey,
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I don't even think that made sense.
Yeah.
No.
Mike
probably not.
There you go, Vic. I think he stacks somewhere with those 4 offensive linemen, or he's part of the 4 of those offensive linemen, like the top 4 offensive linemen. You got that 4, those 4 guys.
Yeah.
Skoronski, Johnson, Jones, and Wright. Somewhere in that order, I think the Bears will love a plug-and-play starter without having to reshuffle their line. Like Peter Skoronski will force some reshuffling. Paris Johnson Jr. would force some reshuffling. Darnell Wright would not. He would come in and be your starting right tackle. Like just a massive prospect, too. Yeah. Violent. Barry's guys got better every single year at Tennessee. When the best defender in the draft tells you that, like, this is the toughest player that I faced, it's what Will Anderson did, like, that means something. Then you go and watch that film, and you can see why. He did nothing against Darnell Wright. Nothing.
At first, I was a little concerned that he wasn't the best scheme fit because he doesn't quite have the same foot quickness, but it's still good enough, and he's just so physical. And on the right side, I think that's more of what you want, right? And he's going to move guys in the running game. And let's not lose sight that as much as you need to protect Justin Fields, you got to keep this running game going too. So, yeah, I like him. He's grown on me throughout the process. I had to kind of get over. I thought his first day at the Senior Bowl, as I was watching those practices, was a little rough, but he was much better the rest of the week. And let's also not lose sight of, like, in our CHGO Bears 100, like, we've noted which guys were at the Senior Bowl. Like, to me, that's important. You had Luke Getsy coaching it. You saw, good and bad, but they were there up close, getting, as close of a view as any of these teams. And that's going to carry some weight. I think it's cool how much they involve the coaching staff in all this and really lean on them to have a valuable opinion.
Before we move on, can I read you my list of my 10 favorite prospects for the Bears? Did you see it?
Yes.
I was working.
I don't believe you, but so just to clarify, though, Skoronski's your pick?
Skoronski's my pick because I think the Bears like him a lot.
Okay.
It's honestly as simple as that. They've done too much work on this guy to think otherwise. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but some guy on the internet yesterday told me that it's because McCaskey's friends with Northwestern people, and so that's why they're going to draft him.
Don't just call Kevin Fishbane Northwestern people.
That was another one we got on the show yesterday. If I see one more rich Northwestern alum mock draft Skoronski to the Bears, I'm going to lose my mind.
Trust me.
Like, no one on this show went to Northwestern.
I'm not a rich Northwestern alum. I did not go there.
Right.
Skoronski's a darn good football player. That's my evaluation, and I think the Bears like him.
Kevin went to Northwestern. Did anyone else?
Kalen Kaler,
Mike Greenberg. I haven't seen Mike Greenberg do a mock draft, though. I don't know.
No.
So,
all right, here's my 10 favorite players. Yes, I purposely left Skoronski out. I do like him, but just in terms of other names, look, you need to have these conversations. My edge rushers, B.J. Ojulari from LSU. Just crazy production.
I like him, too.
Lucas Van Ness, another local kid. My 3 techniques, Kalijah Cansey. Like, that's another conversation. It's like that's similar to Peter Skoronski, right? Doesn't have the ideal measurables, but damn, is he a good football player?
Right.
Like, someone in the teens of this draft or the 20s is getting an immediate starter who's going to live in the opposition's backfield. I think the Bears would like that.
Corey Wooten has Cansey ahead of Jalen Carter.
Just look at the production.
That's how much he loves him.
Kalijah Cansey earned All-American status in 3 consecutive seasons. Now, he went from like a rookie All-American, the second team, the first team. The production was out of this world. Carl Brooks, we talked about him on a previous podcast a while back. From Bowling Green, another 3 techniques stood out the Senior Bowl. My offensive tackles, we just talked about Darnell Wright. The other one, Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. I definitely think he's on the Bears board come day 2. We talked about Devon Witherspoon a little bit. I don't know if he's, like, just in terms of measurables again. 5'11", 181 pounds. I think Dane Brugler kind of broke that down for us not too long ago. Like, the guy plays nasty, tough, wants to tackle. You can't teach that sometimes. And I'm tired of, like, covering defensive players where tackling is a problem.
Yeah.
Can it not be a problem for a defender? Like, isn't that, like, job number 1? I get it. Some guys are better than others, but Witherspoon, it's not. Deonte Banks, Maryland cornerback, is on there. Quan Martin, nickelback safety from Illinois. And my favorite receiver in this class, Zay Flowers, Boston College.
I like it. It's a good list. I think the only name that you name that I'm not really totally on board with is Deonte Banks. But I understand why a lot of people look at him as a first-round pick. He's number 46 on our CHGO Bears 100. I want to give you a name. As we've been going through this process, Johns, I've been trying to designate certain guys that probably fit the hits principle and just the type of player that the Bears are looking for. And one name in the beast that really stood out to me that I hadn't spent a lot of time because I didn't really – safety was definitely a position I wasn't too focused on because the Bears seem to have 2 starting safeties there. They drafted one last year. But do you know much about JaMarr Brown from Penn State?
Oh, he's a good player.
So he played with Jaquan Brisker, not only at Penn State, but also at Lackawanna Junior College. And they're like really close friends. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for like drafting him. But essentially, when Brisker moved on last year, Brown, who was already playing with him, just slid into his leadership role. And like everything that the Bears liked about Brisker last year, with the exception of, okay, Brisker's a little bit taller, a little bit longer, which is why I think Brown's probably a 3rd-round pick, not a 2nd-round pick. But beyond that, like everything Brisker stood for in terms of like a energy in that defense, a team captain, coaches absolutely love coaching him, the instincts to find the football and get your hands on it. Brown is somewhat similar to Eddie Jackson. He has great hands to catch the ball, and after he catches it, he's got insane return ability to return some of these interceptions. The more and more I was doing work on JaMarr Brown, I'm like, as much as the Bears don't need a safety, if they like Jaquan Brisker last year, they like this guy. And at some point, you do have to start thinking about what's the future of Eddie Jackson. We talked about this earlier this offseason. If the Bears were in any type of cap trouble, which they're not, Eddie Jackson probably would have been a cap casualty on a lot of other NFL teams this year.
I think they're already thinking about the future of Eddie Jackson.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's just a name to keep in mind, maybe in the 3rd round. We have him at number 69 on our board, and which is nice. And maybe their friendship and that pairing with Brown and Brisker going forward, just a name that intrigued me to keep an eye on.
I would say, based on some of my friends around the league that I've talked to, like 2 positions that are on the table that they're not premium positions and the Bears don't really need it, but based on what they're doing and whom they're researching, and I think running back and safety are on the table for the Bears. Yeah. When those positions actually come up for decisions and selections, I'm not sure, but Ryan Poles strikes me as a GM who is thinking 2 steps ahead here. It's replacing Cody Whitehair at center. It's replacing Eddie Jackson at safety eventually, and it's finding your running back in the draft at some point where it's not someone you're signing free agency or inheriting, like a David Montgomery, who's no longer here, or Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, I agree. All right. That covers it with our final thoughts on the Bears going into the draft.
So you're going right. I'm going Skoronski.
Yeah. So
Portillo's?
Ooh. Yeah, and then what if we're both wrong, then nothing happens?
And we just go to Portillo's.
Sounds great. What a great deal.
Kevin buys.
Then Kevin has to buy. If it's the field.
He's in on it.
That's great.
At this point, I am like so invested in like what happens with Skoronski, just out of like, just because of the comment section.
Yeah.
That like, I'm not rooting for the pick or whatever, but it'd be, I would smile a little bit typing that up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I like it. All right, before we get out of here, Aaron Rodgers.
It's over.
Yeah, he is a New York Jet. Aaron Rodgers. He walked into the facility this morning with the Jets, with a Jets shirt on, some cool sunglasses, and this is bound to go wrong.
My earliest thought on that, like when it broke, is holy moly, did the Packers get a haul? Like, can the Jets not have waited a little bit and played this a bit better?
Yeah, I'm shocked. It obviously it looks just so obvious that the Jets blinked first.
Yeah.
And really, but to me, the biggest mistake, and I know I've said this before, it still blows my mind that the compensation wasn't worked out before they went to Rodgers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how these trades are supposed to work. Anytime you trade for a veteran that needs a reworked contract, you work out the parameters of the deal, and then you go, like when the Bears traded for Khalil Mack, right? They came to terms with the Raiders, and then they went to work on the contract with Mack. And obviously you go into it kind of knowing what you're willing to do and that it's realistic. But in this case, I cannot believe that the trade that they went and got Rodgers first, and they're like, okay, now we got to figure out the trade compensation. Like, what are you doing?
You know what? What are the Jets doing? But can I give some praise for the Packers front office?
Like, I guess
they tried to get a hold of Aaron Rodgers.
I know.
He was ghosting them. They played this exceptionally well. Like, if I'm a Bears fan, you have to be annoyed about the haul they got.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and the other part of it too, Johns, is I totally understand why the Jets did this. They have too good of a roster to go into another season without a quarterback, right? And now, personally, I would have looked into Lamar Jackson more. I would have looked into Trey Lance more. Before I got this desperate with Aaron Rodgers, but like, I get it. They've been screwing around for so long. They finally have a pretty good team. And I said this on our CHO show yesterday, Johns. I kind of compare the Jets right now to the 2020 Bears because they're sort of stuck. They have a pretty decent roster, but they effed up their quarterback pick a couple years ago. And so now they're scrambling. And like, just like the Bears had to bring in Nick Foles that year, right? And it just, okay, they were a middling plan. Now, I think this Jets roster is a little bit better, and I think Aaron Rodgers is obviously a lot better than Nick Foles, but still, what's the end game? Are you really going to win the East? Are you really going to win the AFC with all that talent that's in there? So to me, to get value on this trade, it ends with you giving up a first-round pick next year. Otherwise, the season was a disaster because he didn't make it to 65% of the snaps. And you're still giving up a second-round pick in that scenario. So if this season goes well, you're giving up a first-round pick next year. But how well is, like, define well? You're not winning a Super Bowl. And so you're banking that on 2024, Aaron Rodgers, who just told the world a couple months ago he was leaning towards retirement, is still going to be playing for you and still be playing at a high enough level that you're going to win a Super Bowl as the New York Jets. Like, it just, I don't see a scenario in which this ends like Tom Brady going to the Bucs. It's just not going to.
It's quite the gamble. Tom Brady went to the NFC, where the quarterbacks, well, they're not as good. Not as good. Aaron Rodgers has just joined a conference where I would rank him behind Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Like, there's your top three teams in the East, right? The East, the AFC. The Jets are good, but I don't know if they may not be as good as the Dolphins in their own division. The Dolphins are pretty darn good too. If Tua is healthy, that offense is humming along. You have Vic Fangio now as your defensive coordinator. You got stars on both sides of the field. They're serious about this as well. And I think that's the argument. Like, who's the better team? The Jets or the Dolphins? Because above them, I would still put the Bills, Bengals, and the Chiefs.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch. I think it's entertaining. Personally, from an entertainment factor, I'm glad Rodgers didn't retire. I'm glad he's going to the Jets. We'll see if they're on Hard Knocks instead of the Bears.
Oh, yes.
Which I think makes a ton of sense.
Like, if you're George McCaskey and the NFL calls you, it's just an easy reply. Roger? Have you seen what happened in New York?
Well, how great would that be for George? Doesn't have to do Hard Knocks, and now Aaron Rodgers has to.
Yes, and you get to see all those problems. Before we go, like the other side part of that conversation with the Aaron Rodgers trade is that Zach Wilson, officially a bust. And you look at that draft class of quarterbacks, Trey Lance and trade rumors now.
Yeah.
The Bears. Go ahead.
Lance's situation's tough because, all the reports I heard, and our guy Nate Tice, I think, went out to 49ers camp last year too and seemed to like what he saw. And he did not like what he saw when he went to Jets camp with Zach Wilson. If he went there, I think that's what. Anyway, regardless, like that injury sucks for Lance. I'm not ready to give up on him. And I wouldn't if I was the 49ers because I'm not totally sold on Brock Purdy, who, by the way, has his own injury he's dealing with. So would I consider trading him for the right price? Maybe. If I was a team, and I said this earlier, like if I was the Jets, I would have seriously looked at trading for Lance. I mean, I still have hope for Trey Lance. But the dude also hasn't played football in 3 years now.
That's something.
That's crazy.
The best ability is availability.
Yeah,
Foxy
but two
used to say it all the time.
I know 2 of those years weren't his fault. He had the COVID year where they literally didn't play football except for one game. Then they essentially redshirted him, and then he got hurt. But still, you haven't played like really. You played 2 competitive games of football essentially since 2019. That's bizarre. That's hard to bank on.
For once in Chicago, the conversation is different. I think there's all like Justin Fields has to get better as a passer. We could all agree on that, right? Mm-hmm. But now the Bears are building around him. That in itself is a sign of confidence, a vote of confidence. Yeah. Obviously, all Trevor Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence. But for once, a different story is unfolding here in Chicago for now.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, the Bears came out of that draft with QB too. In what was a pretty loaded quarterback class. So perhaps some lessons to be taken with this class. I don't know. Personally, I'm not really sold on this class, but we'll see how it all plays out Thursday night. Got a lot to plug here, quite frankly. So, of course, if you haven't already, check out The Beast. Get it. Subscribe to The Athletic. All the draft information you need is in this giant 300-page book I'm holding on YouTube. And I know we use it as a resource, and we'll continue to use it as a resource. And thank Dane Brugler and the athletic staff, all the work they put into it, because it's pretty incredible. We have our own CHGO Bears 100 board that we put together at CHGO, which is really everything in there skewed towards the Bears. So quarterbacks are out, emphasis on players that fit the Bears scheme, offensive linemen that fit the Bears scheme. We really put a lot of work into that, so please check it out. That is available to CHGO diehards today. We also have our draft parties coming up Thursday and Friday. Joe's on Weed Street. I believe we're not completely sold out of drink package tickets. We're getting, there's only a few left, but you can still get in with the general admission starting at $15 and just, pay cash at the bar and hang out with us. We're going to have a lot of good shows. Corey Wooten's going to be there both Thursday and Friday night. Maybe we'll bug Johns at some point to jump on from Alice Hall or his house, depending on where.
Still waiting for that text, Fishman.
I was going to say, depending on where the Fishman allows you to cover the draft from.
You not hear the coughing in the background, Kev?
Anything else? Did I get it all?
No. Yeah. I got a story coming out tomorrow on theathletic.com. Another little exclusive. Check it out.
Wow, what a tease.
It's it.
I don't even know. I don't even know what that's about. I'm excited.
Tired, man. I'm tired.
All right.
But yes, check it out on theathletic.com tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Should be live.
I will not be awake at 5 a.m., but I'll check it out when I wake up. Yeah. All right, we're out of here. We'll talk to you again. Next show will be Friday morning. Friday morning as we recap what happens Thursday night. We'll talk to you then.
See ya.